Hello and welcome to the Paletteful Packs YouTube channel. My name is Alice and I have the April 2022 Paletteful Premiere Pack here in front of me. I'm so excited to open it up, so let's see what is inside. Oh, I love that. The first thing that I see here is this beautiful sticker. It has a sunflower on it and the Ukrainian flag, as well as a little link to UNICEF. The next thing that I see in here are some markers. So this box is a paint marker set, and it looks like the main ones are these YONO, which stands for You Only Need One by Marabou. So these are supposed to work on any surface: canvas, concrete, glass, ceramic, wood, plastic, leather, fabric. That's really cool. It's supposed to be an opaque acrylic marker with high quality ink. You're going to get 6 of them: yellow, red, blue, green, white, and black. And when it's wet, you can use water. And once it's dry, it is permanent on like absorbent surfaces, and it can be removed from non-absorbent surfaces. You can also take the tip out and replace the tip if you need to, which is awesome. I love that. That makes it so much easier. So the next thing that I'm going to see in here are these Posca markers, definitely a fan favorite. So these markers are super popular all over the art world, but these are water-based opaque acrylic markers that you can use on a bunch of different stuff: paper, board, wood, all variety of different media. And we got a brown bullet shape 0.9 to 1.3 millimeter, as well as a light blue 0.9 to 1.3 bullet. So yay, I'm so excited. I love Poscas and acrylic markers, so this is really fun. Ooh, then we have a lot of surfaces in here. Oh, we have a tiny canvas panel. That's really cute. So this is a mini canvas by Art Alternatives. I love the little mini one. That's so adorable. It's the same as a larger artist canvas, same quality, just really small and mini. Then we're going to have a canvas board, canvas panel in here, also by Art Alternatives, and this is going to be a 5x7 canvas board. And then I see this Marabou pad. Ooh. So this is going to have 250 GSM sheets. It's an A4 size, and it is black paper. So this is special black matte paper, and it's suitable for almost all opaque acrylic markers, painters, and liners. And it is also made with 100% ECF pulp, and it's biodegradable and recyclable. So we love that. Okay, so this is everything that you're going to get in the April 2022 Paletteful Premiere Packs. We've got all of these awesome YONO, You Only Need One acrylic markers. We're going to have 2 of the Posca markers, and then 3 different surfaces: the little mini canvas, the 5x7 panel, and then this whole pad of black paper. As I said, I love acrylic pens, so I am really excited to play around with these. So let's go and make some art. So for the first picture that I'm going to show you, I'm going to do a really simple illustration of a jellyfish on the black paper. I thought the black paper would be really cool to do the jellyfish on because it would be like this dark ocean vibe, and then I thought the colors would really pop on it. So I started with a quick little sketch, and then I started laying down some yellow. Yellow is definitely a hard color to build up no matter what you're doing, especially when you're working on black paper. So I figured it was a good place to start so that I could build everything on top of it. Then I added in the white on the like kind of, I don't even know what to call it, like center part of its tendrils. And it was so, I felt like it immediately felt like it started glowing, and it made me really excited. And after that, I outlined it with some red because I wanted to go with like a red, yellow, white color scheme, and also keep it like pretty illustrative and kind of maybe add in some patterns and stuff. So I tried to keep things simple and lay out where all of the different shapes were going to be. And I also used some of the blue to add in some little bubbles and dots in the background. Jellyfish are pretty easy to draw because they're mostly just like one simple shape and then some like tendrils. So it was kind of a good way to play around with the markers and kind of see how they worked. And it was like a cute little illustration to do that didn't take too long. Once I outlined the little, like, I don't know, sections of the jellyfish, I kept building up the yellow in the center because I wanted to get that like as opaque as possible before I put in some designs. And I also wanted to kind of like layer a couple things. So I put in some white little like arches here, and then I put them in between basically the layers of yellow so that when I went over the top with the second layer, it kind of like toned it down a little bit. And I thought that was kind of a cool effect that I wanted to try playing around with and see how it looked. And that was kind of like how I did that. A lot of this was just experimentation to kind of see what I liked and what worked. And this is not really like my natural way of working with acrylic markers. I tend to want to use things like paint. And so doing things that's more like illustrative and flat is a little bit against my initial nature. So this was like a fun, almost challenge for me. So I went back over with some little dots, and then I went back over and I re-emphasized those lines that I'd kind of hidden because I felt like, no, actually I do want them to be in full white. Like I don't want them to be this pale yellow. I want them to be more obvious. Once I put in the rest of the patterns, I felt like it looked okay. So I had put in the rest of the patterns and I did some like dots and just kind of wanted to make it look cool. And then I added in the last little tendrils, and I used the red Yono marker for this. And what I did was for the back ones, I just did like a single line, and then for the front ones, I made it thicker and went over it a couple times so that it was a little bit more opaque, and that kind of just set the front ones out from the back ones just a little bit. So that was the first illustration that I did, just a really simple, cute little like patterned jellyfish on the black paper. And I hope this gave you some like inspiration as to maybe like some different illustrations that you can do. And it's definitely fun to like play around with a little pattern making because then you don't have to worry about making things look like realistic or shading or whatever. So that was that first one. And I think it came out cute. And for the second one, we're going to go to the teeny tiny mini canvas. And I'm going to do all my instincts of using a brush. So I'm going to use the brush from the last Paletteful packs back in March because it did mention that you can use water with these Poscas. And so I'm spraying water onto the little mini canvas, throwing down the Poscas, and then blending them with a little bit of a brush. And this technique works really, really well. It's one of my favorite ways to use markers, and I like to layer them on top of one another and then add them into kind of the wet canvas and like blend it together. And it's just a really fun technique, and it was really nice to use it on such a small canvas because I didn't really have to worry about covering a huge surface area with just these little markers. It works really, really well using this technique on such a small little surface area, and I think it came out really cute. I started out with using that technique to create kind of a vague oceany background, and then I started establishing what I wanted in it. So I wanted some coral in the front, but I also wanted the bottom to have kind of this dappled texture. So I went to start drawing the coral and I was like, wait, I should do the texture on the bottom first. So it's definitely important to try to consider layering in mind, try to think, what needs to go in front of something else and what needs to go behind something else, and, how that should be layered. But after I did that, I kind of like was like, okay, let's go back and start working on the light and the actual like ocean and stuff before we start putting in the detail of the coral. And so as you can see with that, I'm just throwing on the paint and like the marker in little areas, like little highlights, and I'm blending out both with the brush and some water, but also sometimes with my fingers. I use my fingers a lot with this kind of stuff. So like I'll lay something down and then I'll smear it, lay something down and smear it. And then I'm also blending just by using the markers right on top of one another. So I'm going in and I'm adding some coral in the front where I wanted it. And I'm using just the yellow and the red marker like back and forth. And that's kind of blending together to create an orange. And then I use the white right on top of the wet marker as well. And yes, this is going to like affect a little bit of your nib, and so it's definitely helpful to like make sure you're cleaning that out as you go, but that's just kind of like something that you accept if that's a technique that you want to do. I wanted to create this little spiky boy in the back, but I didn't like how it looked, so I redid it a couple times and kind of then added some other little corals in the front with some yellow and green. I added a little school of fishies in the back with the darker blue, and then added in some white to add in the highlights, again working on that like wet paint and just putting it in one on top of the other, and it worked really well. And I don't know, I really like this little coral piece. I think it was a really fun way to combine using like a brush technique with the markers, and I think it just kind of shows what you can do with acrylic markers. Like they can look like a flat illustration like what we were doing before with the jellyfish, or they can be more of a blended water piece that you can blend out with water and create more of a almost traditional acrylic look. And I actually glazed this after with some varnish, and it looks like it could have been painted with like actual acrylic paints instead of acrylic markers. So it's just kind of a cool different way to use them. And I like how that one came out. It's probably one of my favorites that I did. And so for the last painting, I'm going to combine like a lot of those different techniques and just do all the different things in this last painting on the canvas board. And I was inspired by the Ukraine sticker with the sunflower, which is Ukraine's national flower. And so I decided to do a field of sunflowers with like the blue sky behind, which has become quite an iconic image. So I started by doing a quick little sketch of the 4 sunflowers that were going to be in the main foreground, and then setting out like the line of the horizon. And I just drew the horizon line with the blue Posca just so I knew where it was. And then I started out being really, really loose with the base layer of the sunflowers because I knew I was going to go over and clean this all up later when I added in the background and like the leaves and stuff like that. So I just really quickly threw that down and blended together some colors to make some brown. And then I started laying in some loose background area behind that too. And so I used a water technique that I had kind of used in the previous piece as well, where I sprayed it and then I just kind of put the paint marker right on top of that wet canvas and then sprayed it again. And it kind of blurs everything out into this really pretty watercolor effect. And I thought that would be great for giving the impression of like more sunflowers behind these, but that were more blurred and out of focus. And once I had done that to establish the background, I went back in over that with some of the yellow and the green and just went back and forth between blending that yellow and the green together. Most of this, I just used the 2 markers. Like I would lay down the green and then blend the yellow right on top of it or into it. I didn't even need to use a brush. And I did all of that to kind of establish where the highlights were hitting some of those leaves and to start bringing some detail in there. And then I went and added in some like stem like shapes in the background as well and did a little spritz of water because I wanted to keep that kind of soft as well because it was in the background. Continuing to work on the background, like I was saying, like layering is really important. So you want to try to get the background done and then move to like the midground and then the foreground. And, try to keep in mind the colors you're going to be layering on top as well. Like I was layering yellow on top. So that's why I didn't do the sky until after, because laying yellow on top of blue is going to be really, really hard. So that's kind of what I was doing with the background, building up a little bit of those sunflower shapes. And then I kind of jumped to the foreground while some things dried and started building up the inside of the sunflowers using a stippling technique with the brown, the black, and the yellow markers. And then for the ones in the background, I wanted them to have less contrast because they are in the background. So I just kind of did a similar technique, but just with the yellow marker. Once I felt pretty happy with that overall structure, I felt like it was time to add in the petals so I could start figuring out where all the rest of the shapes were going to be. So I started out with like the basic shape of what the sunflower petals would look like and threw in some red in the center and then blended that out. At this point, I'm really not worried about it being perfect or anything like that. I'm going to be layering a lot of petals over this. Like half of this is not even really going to be visible by the end, but I just want to establish where these shapes are going to be so that I can start getting in the sky a little bit more and detailing some more of like the leaves around it and just know where that main yellow area is going to be. I really want to get these big shapes in before I get too detailed in much of the like foreground, and it's kind of this constant back and forth between like wanting to layer the background to the foreground but also wanting to work the whole piece kind of in a unified way. So once I had those basic shapes down, I went through and I added in more details of petals. So I used the yellow Yono to go around and draw each little petal around the sunflowers, and then my plan was to basically like layer multiple layers of petals in that same style on top of this, going between this one and then like the brown and then the yellow again, and just kind of add in those petals that way so that it created this layered look. So that was the plan, and I decided to start with this very first layer and then go and kind of tighten up some of the foliage around it and add in the sky before I went to the next layers. So for the sky, I turned it upside down because that helps a lot, and I outlined it and then started with the darker color of blue at the bottom and then moved up to the lighter color to create a really pretty gradient. And I think it came out nice. I just kind of did the darker color and then I would add in the lighter color and just like literally blend it up right with the pen. And I actually think it created a really cool look because the pens are wet, so you're just kind of like blending them into one another and they actually blend pretty nicely. It just make sure you keep them both in your hand so you can kind of switch really quickly. And then while it was still relatively wet, I also used some of the lighter blue to kind of make some loose cloud shapes, nothing too crazy, just a couple little variants. Then I also used the darker blue Yono pen to add in some kind of like lines, type shadow areas in the stems and the leaves. And then because the petals were finally dry enough, I could go back in with the brown as well and do that second layer of the petals. And I also added in like a little bit of light shading by putting some yellow on top of the brown. Sometimes when like it's really wet and you're trying to add shading in, like adding the light colors in, it can kind of like almost clog up and like feel like it's like pulling away from the color. And when that happens, I recommend just kind of like pushing the nib down into some paper towel or like on a piece of paper that you can like scribble on. It's basically just like the nib is getting clogged up because you've got so much paint there and you just kind of want to wipe it off and clear it off, and that way you can keep going. So that's something that you want to like kind of keep in mind, is like when you're doing a lot of these techniques, they are going to be like hard on your nib, which is, these things have replaceable nibs, which is awesome. But just keep that in mind and make sure you're taking care of your nibs between color switches. Make sure you're cleaning them and wiping things off between all of these different blending techniques to take care of your markers. So now I'm on to the third and final layer of those petals, like I was telling you I was doing, and that is a layer of yellow with some white highlights. And I went around and added that using the same technique that I was just talking about. And once I was done with that, it was kind of mostly about adding little details, clarifying things, and just kind of like bringing the image to life in just those final little areas. But I think this came out really, really cute as well. I really loved working on it, and I loved combining all the different techniques and different ways to use the different markers. So I hope this helped give you some ideas as to how to use your markers, different techniques to try, and I am so excited to see what everyone creates this month. If you'd like to get your own box, then definitely click the link in the description box below. You can go to our website and sign up. And that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!